Welcome to my 11th YouTube Live. So glad to see everybody here on this amazing Sunday, July 31st. Can you believe it's the end of July already? Wow. The whole year is flying by. This past Wednesday, or this past week rather, was the birthday of two important icons in U.S. culture, U.S. history. The birthday of Woodie King Jr. on the 27th. He turned 85 years old, and I'm so grateful for the work of Woodie King Jr. He's an amazing theater producer. Um, he produced Lawrence Holder's play When the Chickens Come Home to Roost that exposed the world to Malcolm X. He produced the very first commercial production of Ntozake Shange's For Colored Girls Who've Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough, directed by the amazing Oz Scott. And probably the most memorable new federal theater production I ever saw was in 2010. I remember it was when they were running one of their last performances at the Henry Street Settlement in the lower east side of New York, Chinatown. And an amazing production of Knock Me a Kiss. I begged the usher if I could just stand because all the seats were taken. It was sold out. Knock Me a Kiss, produced by Woodie King Jr., written by Charles Smith, starring the amazing Andre DeShields as W.E.B. Du Bois, Aaron Cherry as Du Bois's daughter, Yolande Du Bois. You also had amazing actor Morocco Omari, who played Jimmy Lunsford. But I want to thank Woodie King Jr. for being an amazing theater producer for how long? So many years, and produced good theater that is proven commercially successful. He explodes that myth that Black people don't go to the theater, that our stories are not commercially worthy. He's proven that they are. And I think he's the beginning of art, the beginning of the real original art form. From art comes Hollywood, and from art comes TV, and then from art comes the Hollywood film or the TV series, but theater is that foundation. So this past week, I want to thank Woodie King Jr. for everything he's done in theater production. Please subscribe, like, and share my YouTube channel. This is my 11th live. I'm glad to go on live again. Please comment. Welcome comments. Let me know if you're listening. Please let me know. Supporters, let me know. If you've liked, let me know. This is an excerpt from a book. I interviewed Woodie King Jr. for Real Black TV about 5 years ago. Before getting ready for it, I read all of the productions he did since the early 70s, and I read all the directors. But this part, I think, and that's from this book, The Impact of Race, written by Woodie King Jr. The Impact of Race, Theater, and Culture, a foreword by Ozzie Davis, written by Woodie King Jr. He writes, because America is basically a racist society and steeped in European tradition, white Americans won't support in any great degree real indigenous American art. Therefore, individual contributions from white Americans to Black artists and Black institutions will never be substantial, he writes. The few Blacks who are in the 50% tax bracket are giving to our civil rights organizations. Black arts are at the bottom of a very large pile, which includes education, religion, poverty, hunger, housing, and high employment. It's sad to reveal what other governments contribute to their arts. Canada contributes 3 times as much, Great Britain 5 times as much, Denmark 17 times as much, and France contributes 26 times as much as our government. Perhaps they understand the politics of art. The best thing for the stability of the arts, Woodie King Jr. writes, is a partnership with business, individuals, and our government. And that's why, that's what makes a successful production of a play. People from the business sector working with private individuals who both care about theater, and then governmental agencies that grants that have money just for theater. So always been a great theatrical production will always come from working together of those 3 parts: business, individual, and government. In 2017, I had the pleasure of interviewing Woodie King Jr. You can watch this on YouTube, and as you can see, it has 2,500 views. That was about a year ago, but it was recorded about 5 years ago. I and before that, I read his book and seen his productions. That, shout out to Michael Dennis, whose idea was for me to interview Mr. King to talk about his memorable productions, his memorable directors, memorable performances. Most recently, it's J. Alphonse Nicholson, who now stars in Katori Hall's Stars series called B Valley. And I remember him as a very powerful character in a one-man show, one-man play suggested by Kathy Perkins, written by Howard Kraft, called Freight. And he just represents, it's a story of a man coming into his manhood. And whoa, he gave a tour de force performance. I had no idea he would become as commercially successful as he did. But shout out to J. Alphonse Nicholson on his success. And notice the foundation of it is theater. Woodie King Jr.'s production of Howard Kraft's play Freight that J. Alphonse starred in. So we're grateful for Woodie King Jr.'s amazing theatrical productions. This brought me to, just thinking about the birthday of Woodie King Jr. It wasn't only his birthday, it was also the birthday of Norman Lear, who was very influential in creating the sitcom genre. I remembered specifically the Cosby Show on Thursday nights on NBC. And then it was the Golden Girls with my mom and dad watching on Saturday nights on NBC. But before then, it was 227 and Amen. Now, Norman Lear did not produce those, but he definitely produced a slew of sitcoms starring Black characters in the 70s that I saw reruns of. And I first saw it on Kim Fields' IG. This past week, Norman Lear celebrated his 100th birthday. And what this is an excerpt of a book. Yes. Oh yes. So here we are. Norman Lear turns 100, gets an ABC special celebrating his life. This was from a CNN article by Marianne Garvey. What Donald Bogle, I remember buying this book at the Yale bookstore when I was in college. Still have it. It came out 2001. He provides Donald Bogle a very interesting take on. But I also wanted to include the part I remember about this book is Bogle narrating the creative differences Norman Lear had with John Amos. When John Amos was seeking to be paid properly, Norman Lear declined and Amos left the show. And Bogle quotes Amos saying he just hopes it wouldn't go back to the Black family without a father, that stereotype, when he had left in about 76. John Amos chose to leave the Good Time show. But what Donald Bogle says here, where I have it up here, is interesting because of what Bogle, as a Black man, is writing about the images of Black men on the sitcom genre. Bogle writes, what makes Cosby significant despite the negative press he received due to the allegations of drugging women that Cosby received? Donald Bogle writes, in an era that saw proliferation of Black bucks in the movies, Bill Cosby, without restoring to any of the old typing, sensitively, Donald Bogle writes, presented the image of a relaxed working class African American male. No dialect, no broken English, no outlandish exaggerations, no mugging, nor did he ever let himself become desexed. He could casually eye a woman without projecting an image of some oversexed adolescent. And so Bogle was describing the appeal. Why in the 80s, as opposed to now, Cosby had so much appeal. And that's when I was growing up. I was born 79. So I was basically Rudy's age on the Cosby Show. So I was 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, getting used to seeing this family every Thursday. However, what Bogle says is that this is the appeal of Bill Cosby. This was particularly different from the image of the Black man that Norman Lear promoted. As famous as he is, Eric Monty, Michael Dennis's awesome interview with Eric Monty explained some of the challenges that Eric Monty, as a writer of one of Norman Lear's shows, at least two of Norman Lear's shows, um, just what Eric Monti went through in terms of what he saw, what Eric Monti said, removing the Yowza and Bossa lines. He said every time um, the cast would receive it, he would work with the cast to take out those lines because of Norman Lear's production. The Yowza Bossa lines always ended up in the script, and Eric Monti took them out. So it makes me think of how Eric Monti, who was a former writer, really represented the black male image, and he was very serious about how it would be represented and not be too subservient. And then Donald Bogle in 2001, this is from a 2001 book, writes about how Cosby, like Eric Monti, advanced the black male image. How Eric Monti, before Bill Cosby, was conscious of the kind of depictions black men would have, and Cosby advanced that. Remind you, this is within the genre of the sitcom, which requires a laugh line like every what minute, almost or less than a minute, every few seconds. So that's a totally different genre. And it wasn't until the movie Precious that I started to really question the sitcom genre, when Lee Daniels has that sitcom blasting while Precious is being beat up by her mother. You hear the laughing of the sitcom, and you see like the dissonance between what television shows and the reality of, you know, difficult economic life. You know, that's what really got me to question the sitcom and to really study drama and to write drama and to read drama. But kudos to Eric Monti for the foundation and for not putting up with Norman Lear's depictions of the black male image that were subservient, that were buffoonish, that were always joking, and making a dent really in the sitcom genre that Bill Cosby would continue. This also reminds me of the difference between the information you get in a sitcom versus the information you get in a book. But before I go there, I just wanted to say, in light of Norman Lear's 100th birthday, the most important, powerful point, which Eric Monti wrote, was in that episode with Debbie Allen, Good Times, when JJ was going to get engaged. He was getting engaged to get married. And his fiance was a young Debbie Allen. It was one of her early episodes. And it was revealed in the episode that those who were dealing the drugs that they found, the parents found drug paraphernalia in JJ's fiance's purse. And then when they investigated, they found out she was buying drugs not from somebody around her age, but somebody much younger. And I appreciated the cultural and social commentary Good Times was making about how um, ghetto life is really ghetto, and the drug trade is as serious as having young kids sell for them. And people would argue that that's not much different from today. So kudos. I mean, the sitcom was always an interesting place to debate politics. You saw in one of Norman Lear's early sitcoms that kind of cultural commentary between the Black nationalists and the uh, well-meaning white liberal represented by B. Arthur, and the Black nationalist, very proud of her family and very proud of her nation, was performed by Esther Rolle, who performed the role of Florida's maid. I'm sorry, Maud's maid, Florida. Florida was Maud's maid. And then in the story of that sitcom, a spinoff that created Good Times was made. So a lot of culture, a lot of opportunity to discuss and to debate the issues, the political issues of that time was in that sitcom genre. But that's a genre that's totally different from a book. And you know, you see this library behind me. I have a bunch of books. I haven't read every page, but I've definitely read at least one page of each of the books. But I love this visual, which I use for many of my students, the iceberg. You get a film, it's the tip of the iceberg above the surface, but then a book gives you so much more below the surface. And I would say TV would be probably above the surface, just like film, because you have to follow a deep, strong, unwielding formula for the TV writing, for writers for TV. I remember my dramatist teacher, Leslie Lee, told me Theater is where you have the most freedom, and TV is where you have the least. Film, you have less freedom to write and to learn and to explore than you would writing for the stage. So similar to the way the book is in this Iceberg, the stage is just, the possibilities are endless. The book, there's so many ridges, there's so many curves, there's so many uh, valleys and peaks in a book that a film just can't give you, just like a sitcom just can't give you. So, but still in that genre, you can get a lot of debates raised. In the sitcom genre, Bill Cosby raised the debate about the role of African Americans regarding South Africa. Should they play a role? Should they not? Jasmine Guy's character, Whitley, believed you should not play a role if it's going to jeopardize your scholarship. Kim Reese believed you should play a role in not contributing to the racism promoted by US multinational corporations. So Bill Cosby and director Debbie Allen was able to use the sitcom genre to really raise these important questions and debates. Another person, I'm very fascinated with his writings about what the meaning of sitcoms were in his time, which was the 1970s, the time in which he was aware and writing and publishing. Addison Gayle Jr. He was the former chair of English at City College. Former and chair, and he was very instrumental, Addison Gayle Jr., in making sure that Toni Morrison's first novel, The Bluest Eye, was taught at a college level. He was arguably the first professor to teach it at a college level. He understood the layers of it as a study of sociology, a study of history, a study of um, anthropology of a certain time, a study of religion. So he treated that novel as a study and something that needs to be explained and needed to be described, needed to be written about, needed to be published about. And now there's so much awesome scholarly publications about the work of Morrison from those different disciplines, anthropology, sociology, and economics as well, history. So Addison Gill Jr., an amazing, amazing thinker. Um, he wrote an amazing afterword that I'd like to read. And this is an afterword about not a film, not a TV show, but about a book. And the book that Addison Gill Jr. wrote an afterword for is The Way of the New World, the Black novel in America. And that book came out in 1974. In that afterword, he's writing about metaphors. Metaphors and symbols of Black life are as much a part of the present as of the past. The stereotypes, Addison Gill Jr. writes, of Harris, Page, Dixon, of Van Vechten, that's Carl Van Vechten, who wrote uh, Nigger Heaven, that Hubert Harrison said was a poor representation, a shallow representation of Black life. Addison Gayle Jr. is saying the same thing here. Van Vechten, Mailer, that's Norman Mailer, and Styron, that's William Styron, who wrote a controversial book, The Confessions of Nat Turner, a novel, where Nat Turner was deeply in love and sexually attracted deeply to white women. And it was taken apart by a lot of Black critics who said that Styron was feeding negative stereotypes about Black men. So Gail mentions these men and their stereotypes. And their stereotypes, Gail writes, live again in movies and television fantasies written by Blacks, performed in by Blacks, and supported and sustained by Blacks. So he's talking about, just the commercial success of the sitcom genre, including Good Times, those produced by Norman Lear. And I'm, just taking a second look at this on his 100th birthday. Those who consumed Lear uncritically, like me and most people around me, and those who consumed Lear critically, like Addison Gayle Jr. did here. He writes, the list is almost too numerous to mention. Superfly, written by blacks, he's saying, and supported by blacks. Melinda, Shaft, performed by Richard Roundtree. Coffee, um, The Flip Wilson Show. Two, Sanford and Son, produced by Norman Lear, and The Red Ball Express represent only the most flagrant examples. Um, so he's very clear that these are not images that one should study, much less raise a child in. Um, I'm going to skip to the second full paragraph. There's no correlation to be made, however, between the black sycophants of the present time and the novelists. The novelists are on a higher level, says the Gemini Addison Gayle. Past and present, and thus the renaissance wrought by the black aestheticians, the new sense of historical vision in the works of black poets and novelists, the progress made in gaining control over the images. Now he's really recalling Norman Lear, and he's recalling Woodie King Jr., who one could argue has more control over the image and was very clear to present a positive image. Woodie King Jr. was. Um, the progress made in gaining control over the images, symbols, and metaphors of Black life are threatened by men and women of little talent and far less intelligent, Gayle writes, whose objective is not to inform, but to disparage, not to create positive images, but to recreate negative ones of the past. He's really talking about the sitcom genre here, to glamorize the hustler and the hipster. He's talking about what goes on mainstream television, radio first, then television. Now it's the apps. Um, to recreate negative images, negative ones of the past, to glamorize the hustler and the hipster, to elevate ignorance and understanding are paramount for people who must yet break the bonds of oppression. So he's calling a particular group of people that support those kind of images part of um, bonds of oppression because of the negative images of the past that that industry promotes. Last sentence here. Thus, there is little cause for optimism. One is gratified, of course, at the progress of the Black novel from 1853 to the present and the maturity of the novelists. So he's comparing the novel genre similar to the Iceberg. Uh, this is how uh, this is how one should learn culture through books and novels instead of films or the sitcom genre. And there are many novels through which I remember fielding a Facebook question asking, "What are some novels I want my child? I want my child to read some novels. What are some?" And people just showered the Facebook post with comments with book titles. Addison Gill Jr. writes, "One is gratified, of course, at the progress of the Black novel from 1853 to the present, and the maturity of the novelists support Fuller's assertion of a new Black Renaissance. That Fuller is Hoyt Fuller, who was then editor of uh, Negro Digest, Black World. Kudos to Jonathan Fenderson, who wrote a book on Hoyt Fuller called Building a Black Arts Movement about Hoyt Fuller. Amazing job." Addison Gayle Jr. writes, "One knows, however, that the final battle against the imagists, those promoting these stereotypes, continues, and that the new propagandists are more often Black than white. One watches their artistic offerings, listens to their infantile rationalizations, is dismayed at their inability to dedicate themselves to what is noble and beautiful in a race of people. And one despairingly recalls the lines from a Baraka poem, a Mary Baraka poem. Will the machine gunner please step forward? Will those who will defend their image and their culture please step forward and not just keep money to disparage the Black image?" So this is a powerful message I wanted to share on the birthday of Woodie King Jr. and Norman Lear. You know, both had very instrumental roles in the image of the Black man. Norman Lear's image undoubtedly reached more people through his sitcom reruns, whereas Woodie King's work was on the stage. He believed purely. He's a theater purist who believes in the theater production, the power of live theater. And through those, we had very positive images like those in the film Knock Me a Kiss by Charles Smith. So um, we've had a range of opinions. What is key, though, is what kind of image will determine, influence, create our young minds today. What kind of image? The image of the smartphone, the image of the Black man in reality television in terms of the nature of their relationships, or the kind of image we see in the film King Richard that starred Will Smith. Despite his loss of emotional control at the Oscars, um, I'm grateful he had that conversation. So, what are the images of the Black man? This passing of, not passing, this understanding, this recognition of the birth of Woodie King Jr. and of Norman Lear encouraged me to think about what is the image of the Black man? Is it reliable? Is it emotional? Is it emotionally intelligent? Is it aware of family history, family narratives? So that is something we get more culture. We've learned sitcom is just the foundation of the culture. But the deeper part of the culture that you get about your history comes not from the sitcom or the film, but from the book. Definitely from the book. And a lot of the works by Woodie King, produced by Woodie King, including J.E. Franklin's play Black Girl, um, including Knock Me a Kiss by Charles Smith, including Freight by Howard Kraft, shows images of strong Black men, of powerful Black men. What kind of images will children grow up to see? For me, the image of Cliff Huxtable left an indelible mark about the possibilities that I have for my future. But I also had the option to have a library. I grew up with a library in my house, and reading was normal. But I'll be honest, I wasn't really understanding what I was reading until I didn't really get the importance of reading until I was in my 30s. So, and then especially the role of reading in social movements, in social change. It's a remarkable thing that happens to a mind when you reflect on how books and others reading books have changed society, have led to social movements. James Baldwin said at the 87 press conference he attended, I believe it was 1986 National Press Club talk that's on C-SPAN, all the dictators burn the books. You know, that's kind of routine for Latin American, Caribbean societies with repressive military dictatorships. They had to burn all the books so that there would be no knowledge of the history. I am reading Marlon James' novel right now, the latest one he wrote called Moon Witch Spider King. And he's talking about a culture um, being demolished because their libraries were burned, razed to the ground. And civilizations do that. When they take over the civilization they colonize, they make sure their history is erased so that the colonization will be easier. We can get more of our history in a better fashion through books, through detailed books, and take notes on the books. Don't hesitate to take notes. That for me was a higher level of reading when I was able to stop and take notes. So if you're watching this, thank you for joining my live. Feel free to give to my Cash App. I always welcome Cash App donations. I highlighted the birthdays of Woodie King Jr. turned 85. I just saw his awesome wife, Elizabeth Van Dyke, in um, the play written by Alice Childress called Wedding Band. So always remaining in the theater, I always appreciate also Norman Lear for his sitcom work, even though the image of the Black man was still shrunk to some degree compared to those images given by Woodie King Jr. and Bill Cosby, who had a positive image of the Black man, supportive breadwinner and emotionally present parent. An amazing um, example to me that only mirrored my father, who was emotionally present and very strong intellectual teacher. And Eric Monty, thank you for your service. Thank you for the insight you've given. And if you haven't already seen uh, Dora, there's a GoFundMe to support the work of Eric Monty. Please find that and support that. We thank him for the work that he's provided, the foundation from which many other actors grew from. So even though we get a lot of the sitcom, the foundation from it is theater. And in many cases, good theater is based on the work inside books. So do yourself a favor, get the foundation, read that book. God bless you.